Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's dive in to the top headlines. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney arrives in Kyiv as a special guest for Ukraine's Independence Day, vowing unwavering support and backing a just and lasting peace. His visit comes as Russian forces claim new gains in Donetsk, with the three-year war showing little sign of a settlement. Russia says a Ukrainian drone strike damaged a transformer at the Kursk nuclear power plant, starting a fire that was quickly put out with no casualties or radiation leaks reported. The incident came as Ukraine celebrates Independence Day, while the UN nuclear watchdog urged both sides to show restraint. Now in the United States, Illinois governor justifying the move. Trump has already sent 2,000 troops to Washington and says he will extend the policy to Chicago and New York as part of his crime crackdown. Tens of thousands joined pro-Palestinian rallies in cities across Australia as tensions with Israel deepen after Canberra recognised a Palestinian state. Organisers claim some 350,000 people marched nationwide, though police put numbers far lower, with large turnouts in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane. Thick smoke rose above Gaza City after fresh Israeli strikes today, just 2 days after a UN-backed body declared the area in famine. The IPC says Gaza City and its surrounding areas face catastrophic conditions, even as Israel presses its military campaign. Former Defence Minister Benny Gantz has called on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to form a unity government with opposition members to secure the release of hostages in Gaza. The move would sideline far-right coalition partners who oppose any deal with Hamas, even as Israel threatens to destroy Gaza City if hostages are not freed. After Trump's deployment of troops in the US Capitol, hundreds of National Guards were posted on the National Mall, posing for selfies and mingling with tourists, despite it being one of the safest parts of Washington. City leaders call it a show of force by President Donald Trump, while soldiers say they'll doubt they'll see any action. The British government plans to create a new independent body to speed up asylum appeals as it moves to reduce reliance on hotels for migrants awaiting rulings. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says the reforms will tackle unacceptable delays amid growing public pressure and nationwide protests against the policy. Now we start this hour in Europe, where Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has arrived in Kyiv to mark Ukraine's Independence Day, reaffirming Canada's backing as the war with Russia grinds into its third year. Carney, invited as a special guest for the occasion, said Canada's support is unwavering and pledged efforts towards what he called a just and lasting peace. Let's listen in what he had to say.
On this day, 34 years ago, Ukraine declared its independence from the Soviet Union. And Canada was one of the first countries to recognize Ukraine as a sovereign nation. Since then, Canada and Ukraine have deepened our long-standing friendship, a friendship rooted in the shared values of peace, security, and democracy. Over 1 million Ukrainian Canadians call Canada home, which means that every triumph and every tragedy on Ukrainian soil is felt deeply right here on ours. Canada's support for Ukraine is unwavering, and we are with you every step of the way in your fight to defend your sovereignty and to realize your dreams for your country. Happy Ukrainian Independence Day. Slava Ukraini.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in his Independence Day address, praised the courage of his people. Okay, we are going over to Maiden Square now. We are cutting live there. While Independence Day celebrations get underway, Mark Carney, as we just saw, the Canadian Prime Minister, has landed in the Ukrainian capital shortly after issuing that speech, that address. It marks Ukraine's 31st anniversary of independence from the Soviet Union, quite fitting while Russia once again encroaches further into Ukrainian territory, as we see there people gathering, and we have had Zelensky addressing the Ukrainian people on the Independence Day of Ukraine after the collapse of the Soviet Union under Gorbachev back in the 1990s.
Саме це ми робимо 1278 днів цієї війни, війни за незалежність. За кожен із цих днів я хочу подякувати тобі, український воїн, український волонтер, лікар, рятувальник, вчитель, наша молодь, наші батьки, кожен українець та кожна українка. Дякую вам всім за те, що ми вже пройшли, і за ту Україну, яку ми з вами творимо разом. Через 100 років відзначатимуть тут День Незалежності України. Так буде, бо Україна сьогодні інша, Україна сильніша і себе поважає, і Україна не чекає жестів доброї волі, а має власну волю, аби втілювати в життя те, що необхідно нам. Ми казали, ми хочемо тиші, ми прагнемо миру, але достойного і всеосяжного, і тому розраховуємо на силу всього світу. Ось така Україна тепер, ось така Україна ніколи більше в історії не буде до сорому. Ми кажемо, нам потрібен ЄС, так, але ми потрібні йому не менше. І це визнають всі, і такою визнають Україну. Не бідною родичкою, а сильним союзником. Саме про це коаліція охочих. Саме про це був Вашингтон, про це і про те, як забезпечити сталий, надійний, тривалий. Україна отримає його, бо отримає гарантії безпеки. Настільки сильні, аби більше нікому в світі навіть в голову не змогла прийти думка напасти на Україну. Зі святом вас, великий народе, великої країни. З Днем Незалежності. Слава Україні!
We're now joined by Major General Gigi Dawidi, who's a global strategic defense expert, and he joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General, for joining us here on the program. 34 years Ukraine has been an independent nation, and we see now Russia encroaching further and further into its territory, slowly, however, may I add. But celebrations continue in the Ukrainian capital, celebrating that day in 1991, August the 24th, when Kiev got its independence. Mark Carney, a close ally of Kiev and the Ukrainian President Zelensky. How crucial have those alliances been in Ukraine maintaining its defense against Russian aggression during this war, Major General?
Absolutely, Thomas. It's a very trying time for Ukrainians as they celebrate their 34th Independence Day, because Ukraine has been under aggression for last over 3.5 years. And very creditably, they have fought back, because when the war started on 24th February 2022, it was, by all experts, it was envisaged that Ukraine will go down in a matter of weeks. But they stood up for last 3.5 years. This defines the spirit of Ukrainians, which is indeed commendable. Well, Canada and Ukraine are close partners, and as Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, has said, that they stand by Ukraine in the hour of crisis. And as we see that President Putin is in no mood to end the war. In fact, the intensity of operations have increased over the last couple of days, especially by way of drone attacks and missile attacks. And Ukraine needs external help from US and Europe, and they have worked out a mechanism that they'll be supplying, especially the air defense system. Germany and Norway have come together. Norway has promised almost $695 million assistance, and they jointly are going to provide the Patriot system, which are very effective for the air defense. So all I can say is that at present, Ukraine is passing through very critical times. They are fighting for their existence. They are fighting against the aggression. But the spirit of Ukrainian, I think, is a testament of how they held on for the last 3.5 years. And Europeans and American support is very critical for Ukraine to fight on, because as it appears that President Putin is in no mood to end the war. In fact, his conditions are very, very, I think, demanding that complete Donbas area and also demilitarization of Ukraine. I think all the demands are the ones which Ukraine will not accept, or neither its partner Europe and America. Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Major General. Do stay with us as we discuss further updates on the ongoing conflict. As per reports, Norway will contribute approximately 7 billion Norwegian crowns of air defense systems to Ukraine. Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store said that together with Germany, we are now ensuring that Ukraine receives powerful air defense systems. Germany and Norway are working very closely together to support Ukraine in its fight to defend the country and protect the civilian population against Russian air attacks. Norway and Germany are also funding 2 Patriot systems, including missiles. Norway is also supporting the procurement of air defense radars from German manufacturing, Hensoldt, and air defense systems from Kongsberg. We are once again joined by Major General Dverdi. Obviously, aerial assaults have been rife in this war, Major General. Drone strikes, missile defense systems have been central. We have seen hundreds and hundreds of drones counteract each other through the air throughout this war. We report it here on NewsX World on nearly a daily basis. Can you talk us through how these air defenses work, the current state of modern warfare, now this modern technology, the modern technological advancement of drones are now involved in warfare. And also, of course, what's been crucial to this conflict is Patriot missile defense systems, which have now been supplied to Ukraine by the United States. Major General, could you explain to us a little bit about the importance and the significance of those weapons in this war?
Sure, Thomas, because Ukraine-Russian war has been primarily the aerial war. And aerial war, major role have been played by missiles and drones, and of course the aircraft, fighter aircraft as such. So as we look at it, that this war today is in more or less in a state of stalemate, where very little ground progress is being made. And what a progress is being made is at tremendous cost. So the best value-based systems are the air system. And as we know, that Ukraine doesn't have a very strong air force, so therefore they have to defend themselves. And in this case, the air defense system becomes paramount. And how the air defense system works? Well, they work in 3 tiers. You take on the hostile, either drones or missiles, at the longest range, and then you also take on them at the middle range, then at the close range, they are in tiers. The Patriot missile system is a system which can take on the hostile, either drones or missiles at a longer distance. Therefore, this Patriot system is very, very important because it adds on to the air defense capability of the Ukrainian, especially to protect the cities and civilian population, because ironically, Russian Air Force, Russian military has been targeting a lot of civilian infrastructure. So to that extent, these 2 air defense systems can actually protect cities of medium size, and therefore they will add on to the defense of Ukrainian which is very, very critical because, as I said, it is the aerial warfare. Russians have the predominance of in the air, and the Ukrainian needs the air defense system. And Patriot is a very tried out air defense system which can take on the hostile missiles and drones at a longer distance. And this will add on to the capability of Ukraine forces to protect themselves. And it will prove very vital in the defense of their cities and infrastructure. Thomas.
Yes, Major General, thank you very much for that insight. Just one final question, and we are tight on time, so if you could keep it brief. Obviously, we've seen the American dynamics in regards to the support of Ukraine change under the Biden administration to the Trump administration. Could you give us a little bit of an insight of the capabilities, of course, of the American military, the Ukrainian military, which obviously the Americans have supported in the past, and also, of course, now the European support now, which has been given unwaveringly to Ukraine?
Well, I think first and foremost, the change is obvious because President Trump came to power for the second time on the premise that he will be able to end the Ukraine-Russian war within 24 hours. And so, therefore, his stance was that to get the peace deal and pressurize Ukraine to give in. And also, you see the meeting in Gaza last week, President Trump has tried to get the war over. But that has not worked out because, after all, war has to be, negotiated by two sides. But Mr. Putin is actually making it one-sided affair. Now, there have been change in the military aid, the quantum military aid, which the Americans were supplying to Ukrainians because they have almost given weapons and military aid to the tune of $180 billion. And Mr. Trump, his stance or policy is that Europe must do more and not only rely upon America. And that's why you feel now the European nations are coming forward, and like we discussed, the Germany, Norway, Denmark, they all are coming together, and Canada, to pitching so that the Americans' reliance to some extent is reduced. But President Trump has also changed his stance again. At one time, he said that there will be no more aid coming from America, but now he has said that Europe and America will work it out and they will ensure that Ukraine defend itself. So the point is that I think more aid will come, especially in the terms of air defense system and aircraft. And I think that Europe and America will stand by Ukraine in the Iraq crisis until some negotiation is worked out. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Major General, for that insight. We now move on to some further updates. Russia is battling a fire at the Novatek-operated Ust-Luga fuel terminal after Ukrainian drone strikes overnight. Officials say debris from downed drones sparked the blaze at the Baltic Sea export hub. No casualties were reported, and emergency crews are working to extinguish the fire. The strikes also hit the Kursk nuclear power plant near the Ukrainian border, damaging a transformer and forcing output at one reactor to be cut in half. A fire was quickly extinguished and radiation levels remain normal. Meanwhile, in the Samara region, officials say Ukrainian drones struck an industrial enterprise in the city of Sarazan. Governor Władysław Fedor Ishtav confirmed the attack but reported no casualties. Moscow claims its defenses destroyed 95 Ukrainian drones over 13 regions, while flights were temporarily halted at several airports. Ukraine has not commented on the latest attacks, but has previously said strikes inside Russia targeted infrastructure crucial to Moscow's war. And we will, of course, continue to bring you all updates from the ongoing Russia and Ukraine war. We now move on. Thousands of Australians joined pro-Palestinian rallies across the country on Sunday as part of a nationwide march for Palestine. Over 40 protests were held in cities including Sydney, Brisbane and Melbourne, with estimated attendance over 350,000 nationwide. The demonstrations followed Australia's decision to conditionally recognise Palestinian statehood, straining ties with Israel. Many protesters carried Palestinian flags and chanted for an end to the conflict in Gaza.
Expected to be a big and huge rally, but today is more than we expected, which is important. This strong message that Australian people will not accept this genocide and starvation in Gaza, and we want Australian government to take practical step to join other countries to end this genocide.
Australians are horrified that we are selling weapons components to the Israeli government. It's got to stop. And I'm excited at the sheer numbers of folk turning out right around the country. The voice of Australians is really clear. We want peace, we want sanctions on the Israeli government, we want the aid to get through, and we want those weapons components and that two-way arms trade with Israel to stop.
Brisbane police estimated 10,000 attendees, while organisers cited tens of thousands in Sydney. The rallies come amid continuing violence in Gaza, with authorities reporting over 60,000 dead and humanitarian organisations warning of starvation. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called for peace and deliveries, while Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu criticised Australia's decision. We are now joined by Peter Baum, who is the foreign editor of the Weekly Blitz. He joins us live from London. Peter, thank you very much for joining us. Peter, we have seen quite a deterioration of relations between Israel and Australia within the past few days, with both leaders vocally criticising one another. It's come quite a way from 1947. Australia was one of the first countries in favour of the 1947 UN partition plan, paving the ways for Israel's creation. What is your view on Australia's view on recognising a Palestinian state, and of course the public vocal support for Palestine and the sheer amount of people who we can see from the visuals who showed up in support of the cause there?
Yeah, indeed. It's clear, Thomas, that Australia-Israel relations are at an all-time low. There is no doubt about that. The animosity of the Australian government towards Netanyahu and his ministers and the Israeli policy in Gaza have created these conditions that we see in what's happening in Australia today with the protests. I must say, many of the protesters are driven perhaps not by pro-Palestinianism, but there's a huge Muslim majority in Muslim demographic in Australia, and whether they're Shia or Sunni or Alawite or other Islamic groups, the one thing the Muslim community unite over is the Palestinian issue, and we're witnessing that on the streets. Penny Wong, the Australian Foreign Minister, even before she came into government, made no secret of her anti-Jewish state views, and Albanese has always, as we know, been on the left and clearly pro-Palestinian in his views. And that has accommodated, facilitated, and encouraged the anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian marches we've seen. One thing that is a little bit odd, the numbers given around the country is something like 350,000 from the marching, from the leaders of the protests. And yet there's a clear discrepancy. In Brisbane, for example, the marchers have come out and said there are 50,000, and the police have said there are 10,000. So the numbers are being driven up by one side, understandably, for public relations views, but I see no benefit in the police actually saying that the numbers are 1/5 of what are being promoted by the protest organisers. So perhaps the protest numbers aren't as large as the protesters have made them out to be or would like them to be, but clearly the Australian government believe that this particular group of people will be among their core voting base, and will do nothing to stop the marches, which is very, very worrying for the Australian Jewish community, because many of the protests don't just turn into pro-Palestinian marches, which is everyone's right to do, but actually become anti-Semitic. We've seen synagogues set on fire, Jewish businesses and homes being attacked, and Jewish people in the streets in Australia being attacked. So very, very worrying for the Jewish community out there. And unfortunately, neither Albanese nor Wong nor the members of the Australian government have done anything to stop the increasing anti-Semitic attacks in Australia facilitated by these pro-Palestinian marches.
Peter, critics would say that these marches don't have anything to do with religion. You can simply cite the UN-backed report that came out just a couple of days ago that said that there's a famine going on in Gaza that's been facilitated by Israel's restriction of aid flowing into the Gaza Strip. I mean, the social media is filled with images of starving children, which of course Australians, like everyone else around the world, sees on a daily basis. A Demo AU polls found that last year 35% of Australians were in favour of supporting a Palestinian state, and that's now gone up 10% this time last year. So you can see, as this war has gone on, support for a Palestinian state has increased. What are your thoughts on that, Peter?
Yeah, I have no doubt that Australia, unlike other Western countries, if you look at opinion polls between October the 7th and now, where those opinion polls have gone, they've clearly gone on an upward trajectory in support of the Palestinians and very negative towards Israel and Netanyahu. And the only way that that would be reversed is, frankly, a change in Israeli policy or a change in the Israeli government. Of that, I have no doubt, irrespective of the facts of what's really going on in Gaza, because there's been a lot of disinformation and misinformation about it. However, Thomas, that also creates an atmosphere of fear for those Jewish communities in those countries. And it's no coincidence that anti-Semitic attacks in Australia since October the 7th have gone up on a soaring upward trajectory, which is clearly worrying, because many Jews do not support, in Australia I'm talking about, many Jews in Australia do not support the actions of the Netanyahu government and would also like to see an end to the conflict. But that doesn't stop them being attacked just simply because they, of their, by fortune or misfortune of birth, being born into Judaism. So there's a parallel here of the actions of the politics and military actions of the Israeli government, and those protesting, not only protesting about those actions and the ideology of the Israeli government, but attacking Jews because they connect Jews solely with being supporting of the Netanyahu government, which many are not.
Peter Baum, thank you. Always a pleasure to talk to you and get your insight. We now move on. We move over to West Asia next, where Syria has postponed parliamentary elections in Sawida, Hasaka and Raqqa due to security concerns, leaving seats in these areas vacant until conditions improve, according to election officials. The September 15th to the 20th ballot will be the first under the Hayat al-Tahrir-led administration, with 2/3 of lawmakers chosen by appointed local bodies and the rest named by President Ahmed al-Shara. The delays follow recent sectarian violence in Sawida and raise concerns about conflict in Kurdish-held regions. Syria strikes in Sawida were said to protect the Druze, but experts warned they fueled instability. Much of northeast Syria remains under Kurdish control, and implementation of a deal to integrate Kurdish institutions has been delayed. Critics say the interim constitution concentrates power in al-Shara's hands and overlooks Syria's ethnic and religious diversity. Well, Well, that is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you for joining us.